You open a package today. Inside is your phone, your charger, maybe the shirt you're wearing right now. Flip it over. It says Made in China. You barely notice it. But the real story behind that stamp is far stranger than a factory label. It isn't about cheap manufacturing. It's a civilization remembering something it used to know. For most of recorded history, China was not the world's factory. It was the world's economy. Full stop. Economic historian Angus Maddison spent decades reconstructing global GDP data, and even he was surprised by what he found. In of the last 20 centuries, China's economy was the largest on Earth. By 1820, it alone produced close to a third of everything the planet made. So why does its rise feel so new to you? It isn't new, it's a return. In 1839, Britain forced its way into Chinese trade with gunboats. What followed is remembered as the century of humiliation, 100 years of invasion, war, and famine. By 1949, China's share of global wealth had collapsed from a third of the world to about 5%. Then came decades more of upheaval under Mao Zedong. The economy barely moved. Then, in 1978, everything shifted. Deng Xiaoping rose to power and did something almost unthinkable inside a communist state. He admitted the planned economy wasn't working. Harvard sociologist Ezra Vogel, who spent a decade researching Deng's life, described what happened next as a controlled experiment run at national scale. Deng picked a handful of coastal fishing towns and let them try capitalism. One was called Shenzhen. In 1980, it had 30,000 people and mostly rice paddies. Today, it has more skyscrapers than New York City. Notice what actually happened. It wasn't a free market appearing out of nowhere. It was the state testing capitalism in a sealed container, then scaling what worked. Economist Justin Yifu Lin, later the World Bank's chief economist, explained why this succeeded where other reforms failed. His theory is simple. Don't build what rich countries already have. Build what your resources allow, then reinvest the profits into the next stage up. China had one resource in abundance: people. So it started by sewing shirts, not building semiconductors. Low margin, high volume. It worked, and the profits funded everything after. By 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization, and manufacturing consolidated into it faster than almost anyone predicted. Here's the twist. You'd assume a country built on cheap labor stayed cheap. It didn't. Wages rose roughly tenfold. What changed is China never stopped at being the factory. It poured that wealth into infrastructure and education at a scale no nation had attempted. More high-speed rail than the rest of the world combined. More engineers graduating each year than the United States, Japan, and Germany put together. The factory nation quietly became a research nation in about the time it takes one generation to grow up. So why does any of this matter to you, holding whatever device you're holding right now? Because the assumption you grew up with, that the West invents and China assembles, was only ever true for a narrow slice of history. Maybe 40 years out of 4,000. China now files more patents annually than any other nation on Earth. It manufactures more electric vehicles and solar panels than everyone else combined. It isn't catching up anymore. It's setting the pace. So when you look at that Made in China label again, consider what it's really telling you. Not a story about cheap labor. The middle chapter of a much older story, a civilization returning to the position it held for most of human history. You open a package today, expecting nothing but the object inside. What's actually inside is the return of the world's oldest economic superpower, quietly rebuilding itself one shipment at a time.